Sarah, today we really want to focus on self care and self love. And you bring these 2 points up in an interesting way that I hadn't quite considered before, that there is a difference between self care and self love. So, in your own words, how do you think of these two concepts as different from each other? What do they both mean to you?
To me, self care is more of the physical aspects that you do to take care of yourself. Maybe that is doing face mask or working out. Self love is being kind to yourself. And sometimes that means saying no to hanging out with a group of friends when you're extremely tired, saying no to your employer if you are overwhelmed with work. Is just being kind to yourself and remembering that you are a human first.
Wow, yes. So it sounds like you're saying the self care are the action pieces, the things that we do. And the self love is about what's happening in our mind and what's happening in our hearts in terms of how we think and feel. You were a student in two of my classes. You're my very first crossover student where you took a leadership course with me, and then you also took public speaking with me. And the concepts of self-care and our mental health and our well-being are things that I talk about with all of my students. So is there anything in particular from either of those classes that really has stood out to you that you bring into your life now?
I learned this from you in our leadership class, and let me tell you this one quote I have to say to myself on a daily basis: you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to fill your cup before you can fill others. And sometimes we forget, sometimes we run on an empty cup, and that's not really good. And that's when I feel we need the self love to show kindness to ourselves in order to fill our cup. And let me tell you, it has changed my entire life from the moment I heard it. It changed my perspective on being kind to myself and allowing time for myself to take care of what I need to do.
That makes me so happy to hear, Sarah, because when I very first heard about this concept years ago, it also resonated so strongly with me. And now I want to ask you, because you graduated 2020 from Rutgers, you graduated during the pandemic, and as an undergraduate, you majored in public health. And now you're in law school and you're figuring out what your specialty is going to be within law. You're exploring. And I know that it has to be unbelievably stressful to be in law school. When we think about Rutgers undergrad or any undergraduate studies, that's also a lot of work and very intense. So, how would you say undergraduate studies versus being in law school, how do the two compare? How are they different?
Words cannot begin to explain how different they are. In undergrad, I had two jobs and I was taking 16 to 18 credits. I thought that was a lot. And I still managed to do extremely well in undergrad. And, going into law school, I had confidence in myself. This is so easy. This is going to be easy. I've had two jobs, took 16 to 18 credits. Turns out my experience proved me wrong. The thing that makes law school different than undergrad is the fact that you cannot just skimp the readings like you would in undergrad. If you miss one reading, if you don't understand the reading and you go to class, you will fall behind. And once you fall behind, even if it's one class, it will continue throughout the entire semester. It requires you to be a lot more diligent. And of course, the reading for one class alone, you can have 50 pages to read, and the material is dense. Also, there is that pressure of finding internships, networking, and maintaining a good GPA to maintain your scholarship, to get good jobs. All of that is extra pressure.
Wow, I mean, even just hearing you talk about what being in college was like with that many credits, which I think is very high. And man, I know you were working in a law firm in undergrad too, and plus you had another job. I mean, all of that already sounds like so much. And now coming into law school and explaining the differences and having a focus shift where you really can't skimp on even one reading, because then that puts you behind. It's like this domino effect, it sounds like. That's what it makes me think of. It's like if one goes down, the rest is going down with it. So you kind of can never let those
Exactly.
dominoes fall. But how how did you, or this first year, as you finished your first year, now you've started your second year of law school, how did you cope with all of those pressures? And I know you also live with fellow law school students, so how do you, and how have you seen other people in your situation handle these high intensity pressure situations in law school?
Well, I'm going to start talking about myself first because I had to learn the hard way on how to cope with the pressures. I definitely was not kind to myself in the first year. I worked myself too hard and I didn't use the proper outlets or channels that I was provided to cope with the pressures. It was very difficult to the point where I reached a point of having a mental breakdown during the time that I was supposed to be studying for exams. This happened in the spring semester. I remember I couldn't stop crying from how stressed out I was. I let negative thoughts get into my head, but that mental breakdown, I think I needed to happen because it really taught me that I need to be kind to myself. And I don't want others to reach that point to learn to be kind to themselves. But for me, as a person who puts a lot of pressure on myself to be perfect in school, I needed it to happen. And I can honestly say this year so far, I have been so much kinder to myself. Luckily, living with two other law students, every time that I would fall into the rabbit hole, they would pull me back up. Uh, One of my roommates, she is a year older than me. She did her first year in law school, did extremely well, and she would constantly help me to, create healthy studying habits and helping me with any situation that I need. And if I needed a pause, she would just sit down with me and, you know, help me let go of all the stress that I have. Despite the difficulties that I'm going through, what I will become will be was is to help others. And I think that has been a huge motivating factor for me to continue law school, despite how difficult it is. And, you know, by showing myself kindness, I'm hoping that the road to becoming an attorney will be much easier than it was last year. And in law school, you have to figure out what your coping mechanism is for handling these pressures. Every person is different. Some people need to sleep, just take a nap. Others need to go work out. Others, it's maybe watching a really funny show on Netflix. It
Sure,
really
and
depends.
probably a big combination of those things too. Like sometimes you might need this, and another day you might need that. But I just want to acknowledge what a blessing it is to have somebody 1 year ahead of you who was willing to support you and take the time. Because I'm sure their schedule is unbelievably hectic too. So really awesome that you had an in-house support. So what are you doing for yourself now continuously to prevent yourself from going back into that situation you were in at the end of your first year?
The one thing that I do once a month, it may seem small, but I go get my nails done. That is my time. The hour and a half that I spend at the salon is for me. I don't go with anyone. I just go by myself. And this is how, you know, I feel myself when I have my nails done. I also have been going to the gym whenever I'm stressed out, even if it's a 30-minute workout, even if I just go to the gym to stretch. I have found that it helps clear my mind if I pull myself away from the stress. And honestly, it has been very rewarding, both physically and mentally. And, just knowing when to remove yourself. is amazing, because then you can think clearly and you can get so much more done than just sitting at your desk for 2 3 hours straight and doing incomplete work because you can't think straight.
Absolutely. And it is really important for us to pay attention to those initial cues that our brain, our mind, our heart are giving to us, our bodies too, to change it up. Like something as simple for me is when I'm doing a significant amount of computer work and I start to feel the neck and tension, the tension in my neck and shoulders. Okay, it's time to step away from the computer for a few minutes and do something different with my muscles rather than no, 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 I'm going to push through, do this for 5 hours, and then I'm in like significant amounts of pain. And I know a lot of us do that, whether it's something physical or something emotional. We push, push,
Hmm.
push without taking any time for ourselves. So I'm glad to hear that things like doing your nails and exercise are huge. And now I want to ask you, when we've been talking about self care and self love and how it has impacted you as a law school student and the difference between undergraduate and graduate pressures. But if you could put your message in a sentence, what is it that you want people to remember about your experience and how you want to be able to help others, the message you want to share with them?
There are a couple things that come to mind, but the most important thing, tying everything that I spoke about, just because it's not in your control doesn't mean it's out of control. And I think this message is very important because it relates to remembering that you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to take care of yourself. You need to realize that just because things aren't going your way, or you're not coming out on the other end perfect, it doesn't mean that everything is going bad. And sometimes you need to take a step back and remember that you're human first, and just enjoy the ride of school, the employment, wherever you may be at this point in your life. Just take care of yourself first. Everything else will fall in line.
I love that. And it falls right in line with mindfulness principles and enjoying the present because we don't get this time back. Wherever we are right now, we don't get it back. So being able to enjoy it really is powerful. Like being present in the present moment. It sounds so simple, yet it's so hard because
Very.
when we're living difficulties, it's easy to get hung up and stuck on past thoughts or start to worry and have anxious thoughts about the future. And some people really are past focused, and if you end up focusing too much on the past, you might suffer a lot from depression. And if you focus and think too much about the future, then you are struggling with anxiety and fearful thinking, and spending too much time in either of those two spaces, past or future, really doesn't serve us, and we don't get to enjoy right now, today, the present. So I really appreciate you confirming a powerful message that we need to be able to enjoy the present moment together too. Now, if you had to put your message on a t shirt, what does the t shirt say?
My t-shirt would read, "You can't pour from an empty cup." That is applicable to everything that you do, whether it's
I
school
love that.
related or not. And honestly, a lot more students, even employees, need to take courses like leadership, because the skills that you learn, or and that I have learned because of you, Tatiana, have helped me so much in life. You have no idea. I constantly remind myself to be nice and to be kind to myself. And I think people underestimate the importance of taking a leadership course and learning all these life skills.
Me too. You know, I'm all about that and why I structured our leadership course the way that I did. And I, my big dream is I can see that this course should be taught in all colleges to all students and being able to focus on these kinds of things as well. So I'm so happy to hear that our class has been valuable to you inside the classrooms because of the two courses you took with me and also applicable to your life today and even in every step along the way that it has had value for you. And you're an absolutely amazing human being, and I loved have sharing the classroom space with you at all. And so happy that we get to have a relationship beyond school as well too as friends now. And Really appreciate you being able to come on and share your message. This is another platform for people to hear from students like you wanting to lend a hand and help others coming up the ranks, so to speak, and being able to hopefully not repeat the same mistakes or just feel like they're not alone in any of this, too. And I do want to ask you a question. If you could go back in time and speak to 18-year-old Sarah, what would you go back and say to yourself? But you only have 15 seconds to do it, so it can't be an extra long message. What do you tell your 18-year-old self?
I would tell my 18-year-old self that it's going to be okay. No matter what happens in between, you're going to turn out just fine. I think sometimes you need that reassurance that it's going to be okay.
Absolutely. We all need that continuously. And I appreciate you being so open and honest today about a really difficult time because a mental breakdown is difficult in and of itself. It's also very difficult to speak about it. But you and I know the tremendous power that comes in being open, being honest, sharing, and how much transformative power it has to help other people who may be feeling the same way. So, thank you so very much for sharing a beautiful message today of not just the self care, but also the self love.
Of course, it was my pleasure, and thank you so much for allowing me to share my story because I really don't want others to feel like they are alone.